Hi everyone, so today we're going to be looking at the different electron domain geometry. So I'm going to go through each one and then give you a little breakdown of each one. So the first one I have is the linear. Alright, it has the number of electron domains are 2. It has a 180 degree, it's called linear. An example is CO2. Like I said, there's no bonding domain, which means no lone pairs for this example. Then I move on to the trigonal planar, which is this one. So the trigonal planar, the number of electron domains are 3. There's one bonding domain, which means one lone pair. How the trigonal planar is, it has a degree of 120 degrees right here to here. And an example of it is NH3. Now the trigonal planar also, it can be categorized into 2. It's the trigonal planar or the bent. The bent would have one lone pair on there, okay? Then the next is the tetrahedral, which is right here. This is my example of the tetrahedral. It has a 109.5 degree angle. The number of electric domains is 4, and an example of it is CH4. There's no bonding domain for this, which means no lone pairs. However, there are a couple other categories within this. There's the trigonal pyramidal, which has one bonding domain. An example of that is NH3, and it just means that it has an additional lone pair instead of one of the bonds. Then there's also the bent. It has 2 bonding domains, which means 2 lone pairs. Then we move on to our next one, which I have to make really quick. Okay, so I don't have enough balloons, but just imagine that you're going to have one of these red balloons under here, and then another red balloon right here. So there will be 2 other ones on here as well. So where my hand locations are, that's where the 2 additional balloons is going to be on this. And that is going to be called the trigonal bipyramidal. The number of electron domains is 5. And an example of this is the PCl5. There's no bonding pairs in this example. Bonding domain, which is no lone pairs in this example. However, there are 3 other options in this category. There is the seesaw, which has one bonding domain, which is one lone pair. And an example of this is SF4, and it's considered to be called a seesaw. Then we have the T-shaped, which has 2 bonding domains, which is 2 electron pairs. An example of this is ClF3. Then a final one is linear, which has 3 bonding domains and 3 lone pairs. An example of this is XEF2. The next one is, and the final one, is the octahedral. That one, if you can imagine, it's going to have another one right here and a final one underneath here. So that the number of electron domains is 6. You'll have a 90 degree in between each connection. It's broken down into 2 other categories, but first I'll go to the one with no bonding domain and no lone pairs, which is the original octahedral. An example is SF6. Then if there's one bonding domain, which includes one lone pair, it's called the square pyramidal, and an example of that is BRF5. Then the final one is the square planar, which has two bonding domains, which means there's two pairs of lone pairs. And an example of this is XEF4. All right, and I hope that this helps.